It feels like every time the Memphis Grizzlies lose, the first thing that we want to talk about is the rotation issues. What happened with the rotation? I went back and watched that Spurs game. There were bigger issues than the rotation. This whole idea with people not liking the rotation is actually overshadowing some things that we really should be talking about, that we're about to talk about right here, coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I'm your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in the land. So appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with us today. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So make sure you go take advantage of that over now at Game Time. We got a lot to talk about in today's show on Locked On Grizzlies. You heard me in the open. We're going to talk about some other issues that's bigger than this whole rotation thing. Like, that's been a big topic of conversation. There's some other things that we should definitely be talking about on the Grizzlies side. We're also going to talk about in the next segment, in the second segment, we're going to talk about Zach Edey's trajectory, what we're noticing. I saw one thing that really stood out to me that pretty much speaks to the big difference, statistically at least, in what we're seeing from last season to this season. So I want to share that with you guys as well. And then in the last segment, we're going to talk about Cedric Coward's slump, what to make of that. Are there some real concerns there? Is it nothing? I have some thoughts on that and some stats to back up my thinking as well. So we're going to talk about that as well as we get to the last segment. But let's start with this whole thing about the rotations. And I wanted to lead with this in today's show specifically because this has just become a big talking point. And I think it's like a default almost excuse at this point. Like, oh, when the Grizzlies lose, like, oh, it's the rotation. It's the rotations. And look, don't get me wrong. If you've heard me on here, shout out to the everydayers, because I've said it a lot of times. I do not like some of these whole, these line changes, these rotations that the Grizzlies are deploying so far. I'm not a big fan. So this isn't me excusing that in any way. This is more so pointing out the fact that there are other issues that sometimes are bigger than this whole rotation thing. I think it's just the default setting for people because it's like, we don't like it. So when they lose, let's just talk about the rotation. And there were moments in this Spurs game where the rotations weren't great. But I don't think that's the whole story. We're going to tell the whole story on here. And that's definitely not the whole story when you talk about what happened. Specifically, I'm going to focus on the fourth quarter, right? Went back and watched the Spurs game. And when you focus on the fourth quarter in particular, some things really stood out to me. Jock Landale played 2 minutes. Olivier Maxence Prosper played 2 minutes. -8 in those 2 minutes. Okay? Zach Edey was a plus in the quarter. Jaren Jackson Jr. was a plus in the quarter. Cedric Coward was neutral. He finished 0 in his time on the floor. Santi Aldama, same thing, 2 minutes, just like Landale and Prosper, -10 in those 2 minutes. So a lot of the guys on the bench were terrible in their short time on the floor in the fourth quarter. Here's my problem, and here's what I'm going to say. This game in particular, and there are examples of this, what I'm about to say, in several games this season. This is just one where, okay, it's time to address it. This isn't necessarily just a rotational thing with the Grizzlies. Like, the rotations aren't simply just the reason that they're losing. Some ways, you just got to look at it for what it is. They don't have the guys right now to close games against a lot of these top-tier teams. They don't have the guys right now. Ja's hurt. Ty Jerome's hurt. Scottie Pippen Jr.'s hurt. It might not show as much over the first 3 quarters. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But it shows for real in the fourth quarter. So getting back to the whole rotations things or whatever, you saw some people saying, oh, They shouldn't have put the subs in, or the sub patterns in the fourth quarter were ugly, whatever. At the end of the day, when you look at the totality of the fourth quarter, Zach Edey, Jaren Jackson Jr. played 10 minutes. Cedric Coward played 9 minutes. Zach Edey in those 10 minutes was +2. Jaren Jackson Jr. was +2 in that time on the floor. Julian Champagnie for the Spurs played the full 12 minutes. De'Aaron Fox only played 8 minutes. Keldon Johnson, 8 minutes. Harrison Barnes, 9 minutes. Again, Zach Edey, 10 minutes. Jaren Jackson Jr., 10 minutes. Oh, they were in foul trouble too, by the way. Jaren Jackson Jr. and Zach Edey were dealing with foul trouble. So when you factor all of that in, you say Cedric Coward gave 9 minutes. Zach Edey played 10. Jaren Jackson Jr. played 10. They pretty much matched and somewhat exceeded the minutes of the Spurs top guys. Again, Champagnie, who solid player, but if Champagnie's the only guy playing the full 12 minutes, it is what it is. De'Aaron Fox played 8 minutes. In the simplest form, the Spurs just closed better. That's not the first time that that's been the case for the Grizzlies. The Spurs just closed the game better because they had better available options. De'Aaron Fox, who at times has already shown that he can be one of the best closers in the NBA. We saw it in Sacramento, and we've seen on several occasions this season where the Grizzlies in the fourth quarter have had their struggles. This isn't some necessarily new thing, and they're starting to ramp these guys up a little bit more, right? Again, we just talked about Cedric Coward, 9 minutes in the fourth. Jaren, 10 minutes in the fourth. Zach Edey, 10 minutes in the fourth. And Zach was good. Cedric Coward, we're going to talk a little bit more about the slump he's dealing with later. And, you know, Jaren wasn't good. My co-host Joe Monax touched on that in the last episode. There are other examples, like the Cleveland game is one we can go back to, where Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley both played the full fourth quarter, 12 minutes. But some Grizzlies guys were on minutes restriction that time. I know Jaren, I think, played 9, and Vince played 10 minutes in the fourth quarter of that game. But Zach Edey was on a minutes restriction. Cedric Coward was on a minutes restriction. So you really couldn't take too much from that, because that just was the situation that the Grizzlies were in at the time. But it's not as simple as just, no, it's rotation issues. If you tell me my best guys are going to play 10 minutes in the fourth quarter, we should be able to put together a solid fourth quarter in those 2 minutes with those guys off the floor. Because if you don't agree with this, you're basically saying they should play the full 12 minutes. And they're in foul trouble. And with the way that the Grizzlies like to get up and down, you can put them out there the full 12 minutes. They're going to play. They're competitors. They're going to stay out there. But then in those last 2-3 minutes, when you see them wanting off and you see Jaren's shot starting to fall short, and you see Zach Edey picking up a lazy foul where he should have jumped, but instead he reaches and hits a guy on the wrist, that's fatigue. You need your guys at their best in those situations. And you tell, hey, Jaren's going to play 10 minutes in the fourth. Zach Edey's going to play 10 minutes in the fourth. You should be fine. So they just don't have the guys, because there's no way you take those guys out for 2 minutes and you should get beat by 10 points. Santiago -10. You know, we talked Jock Landale -8, 2 minutes. Olivier Maxence Prosser -8, 2 minutes. It's no way it should be that. And some people will say, okay, maybe you should, you know, keep Jaren in, take Zach out, and do it like that. What good would that have done you in this game? We just keeping it real. You saw how bad Jaren Jackson Jr. was in that game. What good would that have done you? Sure, Zach Edey playing with some of the reserves, you probably could have survived a little bit, but keeping just Jaren out there with Omax or Santi probably wouldn't have done you much better. At the end of the day, you need Ja. You need point guards to kind of facilitate this thing. And, you know, hopefully you get these guys back soon. Ja Morant, there should be an update coming here very soon. I think maybe at the time of this recording, didn't have an update, but I wouldn't be surprised if by the time some of you are listening to this, potentially in the afternoon or in the evening time on Thursday, there will be a Ja Morant update. Javon Small potentially as well sometime soon. There should be updates as well. So we'll hear more about a couple of these point guards. Ty Jerome still sometime January. Scottie Pippen Jr. still a ways away. So that's kind of the state of the point guard situation. And quite frankly, it's hard for me to judge this team, particularly in the fourth quarter, until you get those guys back, especially against those upper echelon teams. You can get away with it against the bad teams. But when you play those teams who are capable of ramping up the intensity in the fourth quarter, and this shouldn't be anything new. We've seen this. If you go back to the year 21-22, 22-23, those two seasons where the Grizzlies were really good without Ja Morant. I don't want to stay on this point for too long because then I'll go off into a whole nother tangent. But when the team was really good in those games without Ja Morant, most of them were blowouts. And when they weren't able to blow teams out, especially when they were playing good teams and it was a close game in the fourth quarter, that's when those struggles came because you didn't have a Ja as a closer. And that's when Desmond Bane wasn't really a good closer at the time. Jaren Jackson Jr., Tyus Jones was a solid point guard, but he wasn't some closer. So the fourth quarter struggles really showed in those type of games. This is nothing new with the Grizzlies. You go back to the playoff series against the Warriors, right? 2022. Ja Morant got hurt. After he got hurt, the Grizzlies, those next two games were right there. The next game in Golden State, in that next game, they were right there, fourth quarter. And they fell apart in the fourth. Couldn't score. Didn't have a closer. So this is a very relevant point, and this is something that we've seen. Look, the rotations, unless you're saying, hey, throw all those guys out there 12 minutes, there's no excuse because at the end of the day, it was only 2 minutes. It's only 2 minutes. Any good team in NBA should be able to spare a couple minutes with backups in a 12-minute quarter and be able to survive. And the Grizzlies right now, against some of the better teams in the NBA, they're just not able to do that. It's just a situation. But coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to switch to a lighter tone, a better tone. Let's talk about the Zach Edey rise. I saw some numbers that I really want to get into with you guys. Let's talk about that next here coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Make sure you go take advantage of that now over at Robinhood. We got to talk about Zach Edey, the big Zamboni, Zebo, whatever you want to call him. He's a problem. Zach Edey is a problem for NBA teams, and it's been fun to watch this. I always talk about it. This isn't just Grizzlies players. Like, this is just me as a fan of basketball. I've always been this way, even with guys who play college basketball. Like, when you can physically see the improvement in someone's game, not in the numbers. I'm not talking about like, oh, you notice a guy went from 12 points to 18 points a game, and it's probably just more volume. But when you can see, man, this guy, he had a left-hand hook now, or, oh, this guy added a step back. Like, when you could see the work that someone puts in, you really appreciate it even more as a fan of the game. And I'm sensing some of that with Zach Edey. Like, you can tell, yeah, he was hurt. He had the all-season surgery, but he didn't just sit down and say, oh, I'll just work on my game when I get back. Like, no, he worked around it. Like, yeah, I could still get stronger. I could still, improve other areas. While, yes, I can't be on my ankle as much, but I can still get stronger and be more physically imposing. And that's kind of one of the things that we've seen. So when we talk about Zach Edey's trajectory, right? What's really changed from year one to year two? You go to year one, some people were out on Zach Edey. Some people were mad on him. And some people were like, he needs a new coach. Everybody probably was one of the three. And I remember when Taylor Jenkins was the coach and the Grizzlies had that, offensive system, they ran where Noah LaRoche had a hand in it and things like that. When they had that offensive system, a lot of it was Zach Edey spacing the floor. We saw him at the three-point line a lot. He talked about embracing this new role that's completely different than the way he played at Purdue. Cutting. I remember when we were in San Antonio, I asked Taylor Jenkins, about Zach Edey's role, potentially getting him more touches. And he basically said, when it comes to post touches, we want Zach Edey getting the ball, maybe like when he runs the floor, gets a little duck down here and there, but like they ain't running plays for him where they throw the ball in the post and say, everybody get out the way, it's Zach Edey time. But Zach Edey himself said it a few days ago, like it's starting to feel like Purdue a little bit. And you start to see the touches that he's getting. That's one of the things that stood out to me. It's a better system that fits his game. Everybody sees that part. Everybody sees that part. It's a better system that fits his game. Then there's the physical improvement, right? Zach Edey also said, I believe after one of his first two games, he said that, I'm not playing on an ankle and a half anymore. Like he said, he played basically on an ankle and a half for most of last season. And again, Zach Edey isn't someone that I'd take as someone who would make excuses. I think he genuinely felt like he was limited at times. His movement is better. And you've seen him get up for a couple of these blocks, and it's like he's getting up for them, and he's catching these alley-oops, and he's a real rim runner when it comes to getting to the rim. The physical improvement also goes even beyond that. It goes to the way he's moving guys. It's helped him as an overall rebounder, right? It's helped him as a finisher, and it's just helped him as a defender. One thing that I used to talk about with Zach Edey last season, one of those things where it's like, he ain't ready for the post touches yet. I used to say that, and I still believe that was the case last season. He wasn't ready for it yet because a lot of times when Zach Edey got the ball last season, he was pushed out. He wasn't as physically, and he will tell you this. This isn't me just, making something up. Zach Edey, if you go back and listen to his end of the season media availability, he said it himself. Being stronger was something that he wanted to improve because he played against Zubac, Valanciunas, those type of guys, and he wasn't as physically imposing as he's used to being. He said that's got to change. So that was an emphasis. And you go back to watch him last season, there were so many times where he took hook shots, and I would almost rub my teeth, like in a cringy way. It's like, that's not the Purdue hook shot right there. That's a hook shot from the free. That's like a mid-range jumper. He's just shooting it as a hook shot because he wasn't getting deep post position where he's turning around. And what we're seeing this year, just drop the ball in the basket, put a little soft touch on it, it'll roll around the rim. Those were long. A lot of those hook shots were long hook shots, and he wasn't converting them. And it just didn't look like now. Some of that was, again, you played in this offense where he didn't set many screens and all of that stuff. So, yeah, that played a role. But let's get into the numbers real quick because so far this season, you look at the broad numbers, right? 67% field goal percentage shooting compared to 58% last season. So there's a sizable gap there. Percentage of his field goals by distance. Check this out. This is 2-point field goals. So here's one of the differences to me. Now, if you go this season, shots between 0 and 3 feet, pretty much the same. 50% of his shots were between 0 and 3 feet last season. He's at 48% this year. Last season, only 33% of his shots were between 3 to 10 feet. This season, up to 43%. You know what that tells me? He's getting exactly where he wants, because then when you go to the 10 to 16 foot area, I think that's where he didn't want to shoot. But this year, 43% of his 2-point field goals are right there in the 3 to 10 feet range. I think that's the money for him, because we know what 0 to 3 feet is. That's easy money, right? He's going to dominate in that area. But here's what really stood out to me. Field goal percentage by distance. 0 feet to 3 feet. 76% last season, 71% this season. He's great regardless. But when you get to 3 to 10 feet, check this out. Listen up real quick. 41.4% last season, 3 to 10 feet. This year, 67.6%. He's putting himself in better position. Because I feel like most of those shots were closer to 10 feet last season. This year, more closer to 3, 4, 5. He's getting exactly where he wants to be. And we're seeing, as he said, more of a Purdue version of Zach Edey. It's the physical advantages that he's gained. It's mental as well. Like, he talked a lot last season. I remember early in the season, that Lakers game where the Grizzlies, he got thrown in the fire. They set some some screens on him, put him in screening roles. It was Anthony Davis, LeBron James. Fourth quarter, they went at him. And it stood out to me because Zach Edey was like, I'll be ready next time. And a lot of guys say stuff like that. But, for some reason, when he said it, I was like, I think he probably will. I mean, he has gotten a reputation as a guy who's a quick learner. And we're seeing that. But that's one of the things that's really stood out to me in terms of, it's not only the efficiency is improving, he's getting to where he wants to. And that's because of the physicality improvement. And it's a healthier version of Zach Edey. But coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to talk about Cedric Coward. He's kind of going through his first real NBA slump right now. What to make of it, I'm going to tell you next, coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Game Time. Look, the World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever. It's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is going to be the hardest part. And that's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. It's simple. You pull up the app, and the layout's going to be very simple for you. You scroll through the matchups, you can compare seat views. You click on the seats, it's going to show you exactly what the seat view will look like in that arena. Prices include the fees up front, which means there are no last second surprises at checkout, and you'll get alerts for teams and matches that make it easy to grab tickets the moment they drop instead of missing out. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go over at Game Time. Cedric Coward's in a little bit of a slump lately. It's not been the prettiest and not been the best basketball for Cedric Coward. And, we got to talk about it. We got to talk about it a little bit because, quite frankly, one of the things that automatically stood out to me when we first kind of start seeing Cedric Coward play was, this is what I call a safe player. What I mean by a safe player is when the shot's not falling, he has this to fall back on. Like, he can rebound the basketball. He can defend. So when there aren't really that many rebounds there, he can still defend. When he's having a tough night defensively with one of the better guys in the league, he can still crash the glass, knock down some three-pointers. Like, he has all these different ways where he can be an effective player. It's like in pitching, when you don't have your fastball, you still got a good curveball. You still got a good changeup. When you don't have your slider, right? That's your go-to pitch, your out pitch. You still got a real good fastball or changeup or whatever to depend on. And that's how I like to think of Cedric Coward. But there's no doubt about it, he struggled as of late. So just some of the numbers real quick. When you go to his first 8 games of the season, Cedric Coward shot 50% or better in 7 games. 7 of his first 8 games. 3 of his last 14 games, you're talking about 37.7% from the field, and he's only shot 50% or better in 3 of the last 14 games. So in his first 8 games, he had 7 games of over 50%. Last 14, 3. 37.7% from the field, 27.8% on three-pointers. Another thing, defensively, like the playmaking hasn't been there as much. First 8 games, averaged a steal a game. 8 steals. 14 games since, 5 steals. So the playmaking hasn't been there as much, but let's get into it because as I kind of alluded to when I was talking about Cedric Coward being a safe player, not really concerned. I know many of you aren't really concerned either. This is a rookie who's learning on the job, so to speak, right? And when I look at his shots, the quality of the shots do not look bad. I'm not looking at Cedric Coward shots and saying, oh, that's a terrible shot. That's a bad shot. The shot quality does not look bad. I do think that, he'll get better shots and easier points when the guards get back. That's something that the point guards get back. If you go back to the preseason, right? Cedric Coward struggled in the preseason too. But you know what else happened in the preseason? John Morant wasn't available. Javon Small was in and out. Scottie Pippen Jr. played, a couple preseason games. Ty Jerome, same thing. Played, a couple preseason games. So those guys were in and out. John Morant didn't play. And Cedric Coward didn't have a point guard. And if you watch his game so far, when he has a point guard out there, his offensive game flows much better because we started to see it as the Grizzlies lost all these other guys. The Memphis has put them a little bit more in pick and rolls, and it's been a mixed bag. There have been some turnovers in there. We're going to talk about that when we make our last point here. But there have been some turnovers. There have been more like, he dribbles into more shots, especially that mid-range jumper, and he's made some of them. It's like, man, when that becomes consistent, it's going to be really good. But it's almost like his development in a way with some of those skills is being fast-tracked. Like he's doing some of those things that we didn't really get to see Desmond Bane do until year 2 after he went to the Summer League and the Grizzlies threw this stuff at him in Summer League and basically said, work on your ball handling, work on your playmaking. Cedric Coward is being put in a position to do more of that already because of the fact that all these guys are injured. So I do think that plays a role in it. And then some of the just missing shots. Like Cedric himself, he always says, I trust my work. He's going to keep shooting them. He's not going to lose his confidence. So the tide will turn for him on that end. Another thing that's really stood out to me, it makes me feel like with Cedric Coward, the slump is just a slump. This is nothing, real, so to speak, is the fact that I noticed in that last game, he really was intentional about trying to get the ball to Zach Edey. Doesn't sound like a big deal probably to some, but with his ability as a 6'6" wing to get to that mid-range jumper, he's going to put defenses in a bind. He's gonna be that guy when you get into those 2-on-1 situations and he stops for that mid-range jumper. Because some teams are going to disrespect players like, oh, he don't got a mid-range jumper. They're just going to go find the big, box him out. But when Cedric Coward's there, they're going to say, oh, we got to step up. The scouting report says this guy has a really good mid-range jumper. And when they step up, he throws it over the top of their head for alley-oop to Zach Edey. There were 2 plays, couple turnovers actually that I remember from the Spurs game where one he tried to throw it inside and I think he threw it over Zach Edey. The ball sailed out of bounds. And there was another one where he tried to save the basketball, tried to get it to Zach Edey. But both of those cases were examples to me where Cedric Coward is another player who's being more intentional about making sure he gets Zach Edey the ball. I think that's going to be helpful for his playmaking. We're starting to see him put his head down, drive the basketball a little bit more, having Zach Edey as kind of that safety blanket. When you get in trouble, just throw it up to the 7'3", 7'4" guy, and he can kind of bail you out. So, again, I don't think this slump is long-term. The shots will start to fall from him. I think the point guard play, he's one of those guys, that's really missing, the effective point guard play. He runs the floor really well, but, again, this team is really, really fast all the time, but they are even faster. You can put them up there with anybody when John Morant's on the floor with the way that he pushed the basketball. So looking forward to seeing how Cedric Coward bounces back from this stretch. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every day. For your second listen, go find the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Show. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. And look, as I said, make sure you let me know what you guys think. Now, that rotation thing, I know the rotation issue is a big issue. I've touched on it. I've talked about it. But again, it gets to a point where this is just how he's gonna play, at least for now. He's laid out his plan. We'll see how it works. Isolo, that is. But there are other issues that have kind of been covered up because of the focus on this whole rotation thing. And I think the Grizzlies just don't have the bodies right now sometimes to beat some of those upper echelon teams. But hopefully that'll change soon, right? We'll get some updates here shortly on a couple of these players. But appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. Me and my co-host Joe Molinax should be back with you for tomorrow's episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But remember, Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.